Feel a bit lonely facing so many fund managers, but it's a great pleasure for me to be here. I think it's very important for us as a regulator to be able to meet with practitioners and hear your feedback. I've prepared a couple of slides, actually about 16, and I was asked to go through that quite quickly to leave some time for questions. So if you promise to only ask a gentle and nice question, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll take you through the 102 articles of the Aifmd level 2. Let's move on. What I thought I would do is just to give you a bit of insight about Esma. We are rather a new player in the regulatory field, only created last year. So I thought it could be interesting just for you to have a bit of insight of what Esma is and how we operate. And then quickly after that, we'll go into the work that we're actually doing on the asset management industry, going through a number of regulation and directives. Just in terms of Esma, you've got there our mission statement and some of our organizational characteristics that we have recently defined. As you know, Esma is the European Financial Market Regulators. What's really important is our mission, in our mission is the fact that we have been set up to reinforce the protection of investors and also, of course, to reinforce the stability and well-functioning of financial markets. We're also there to help building or reinforcing the single rule book, and also there to coordinate direct supervision. Even in some cases, we're also doing some supervision ourselves, namely for credit rating agencies and soon on trade repositories. You also have the organizational characteristic of the organization. Of course, we are European, that goes without saying. Cooperative, and you will see that our governance is organized along the line of very close cooperation with the national competent authorities. We aim to be effective, professional, independent, and it's really important. One of the reasons why we are based in Paris is to be away from the European Commission. And accountable also means that we want to be transparent in what we are doing, in the work that we are doing. And I'll come back to you on that because I think it's important for you to know that you can interact with us in various shape or forms. Of course, as you know, Esma is part of a larger setup. A whole new financial supervision structure has been put in place last year with 3 authorities. Esma is only one of them, and with a European Systemic Risk Board, which is gathering people from those authorities as well as people from the ECB and the European Commission. So basically, the setup was to address the issue brought out by the Laurent report, which was the fact that financial markets and financial players were more and more global, while supervision was really left at the national level. A quick word about internal governance, and that's where you see that we are really closely linked to the national competent authorities. The way we work is through standing committees. We've got about 9 standing committees which are looking at different topics, most of the time looking at 1 or 2 European directives or regulations. So the one which is of most interest for you is the Investment Management Standing Committee, which is within my division. And in that committee, we're really preparing the work in all aspects, from drafting legislative text to preparing guidelines to also doing a bit of supervisory convergence and more of that. And those papers, together with our staff, are then presented to the Board of Supervisors that gathers the 27 national competent authorities, and we are making decisions on those papers. The good thing for us, compared to our previous organization, is that now we can make decisions with a majority, qualified majority in some cases, but not always, and we don't need unanimity or consensus. Needless to say that it makes our life much more easy. And then we've got the management board and the Esma staff. What's important in that slide is the 2 ovals on the left side, which are the way we consult with stakeholders. To each of the standing committee, we've got attached a consultative working group made of different people related to the issues that the standing committee is tackling. And that group is advising us on a constant basis on the work that we are doing. Then at the Esma level, we've got the Securities and Markets Stakeholder Group, which is a much wider body, also made of people from various regions, mostly involved in the financial industry, of course, but we are also providing us feedback, a more thorough and a more advanced feedback, and we're trying to mobilize that group as early as possible in all the processes and in all the topics that we are looking at. So, I mean, that's the two main bodies or venues that you can use if you want to interact with us. Of course, we are also open to bilateral contact. I think there is someone in the panel that mentioned that he had been visiting my team last week. We are based in Paris. It's not far away. Feel free to come to see us and discuss. We'll be very happy to do that. The only limit to that is that we are still a small team, 75 people, even if we are supposed to grow quite fast. So sometimes we are lacking the time to welcome you, but it's the only limitation that we've got. In terms of main tasks and powers, there is quite of an upgrade compared to our previous organization. We've got the ability to issue guidelines and recommendations, and we have done so, and we will continue to do so. But we also have a lot of more powers. I mentioned consumer protection, which is really important. And linked to that, we've got this ability to act in emergency situations. So we already have that in our regulation. And if you look at the MiFID II project, those powers are likely to be substantially extended, including the ability to ban services or products if we assess that they are detrimental to customer protection or to the financial stability. The other thing that we can do, of course, is develop technical standards, and we are depending on that on the request from the Commission, but they are binding by nature, so quite a strong force, which is not the case of our guidelines and recommendations, which are only compliant and explained, but they can be addressed to both the competent authorities and the practitioners. And the rest is more about monitoring systemic risk, which is really important, and also ensuring consistent application of EU law with a single rule book objective, which is absolutely fundamental in our work. So that was very quickly a review of what Esma is and is doing. If we move on in the area of asset management in terms of regulations, I mean, I think the previous speaker mentioned all of the regulation that are in the pipe. I just selected a few and reassure you I'm not going to cover all of them, at least not all in details, but I just wanted to update you on a few of those, and of course we can come back to them depending on your questions. Before I do that, what I think is important to note is out of those, we are starting to see regulations coming from the European Commission with different objectives. While most of the previous regulations were aiming at systemic risk, filling regulatory gap, regulating part of the industry that was not either evenly or properly regulated, one of the latest regulations that came out, which is the Venture Capital and Social Entrepreneurship Fund, is of a different nature, because this one is really there to promote some type of asset management and to promote economic growth. So I think it's quite a shift in the objective and in the momentum of the Commission on those. Of course, what is not mentioned on that list, and you may, I'm sure I've read about that, is the shadow banking project, which has recently been launched by the Commission with the green papers that I think was issued last week, which will possibly affect some of the part of your industry because ETF and money market funds seem to be included in that work. Moving on with the Aifmd, I guess you know where the situation is and our role there, where the request for assistance from the Commission with a very tight deadline. We issue a call for evidence, then we had a public consultation. I know you're going to complain about the public consultation because it was short and over summer. Apologies for that, but the deadline that were imposed on us by the Commission were incredibly tight. And we had a public consultation in August last year. With all of that, we managed to submit our advice to the Commission in November last year, and the Commission is looking at that, has actually started to discuss the draft of the Delegated Act, and I'm sure we'll come back to that. Aifmd is a very large piece of legislation, as we all know. Level 2 is unlikely to be much smaller. As mentioned, I think in the provisional draft by the Commission, there are about 122 articles. And our advice to the Commission was also quite lengthy. We all know the objective of regulating part of the industry which is not evenly regulated or not regulated at all. Systemic risk and protection of the investor was the two key objectives. There is a lot of complexity in the text in terms of protecting investors and all investors, because some of the products which are covered are only being addressed to professional investors, or really the higher end of the retail investor segment. And of course, there is a lot of entities which are covered by that directive, from small boutique to big organization. And the need for proportionality, which is not always evident or easy to keep in mind. There are a number of technical standards that we need to issue, and we're working on some, and we will continue to work on the others, as well as guidelines. So quite a lot to do, even after the level 2. And that's where we are. The level 2 measures are due for adoption by the Commission in summer this year, with the transposition deadline of July 2013. What are we exactly working on for the time being? We are working on guidelines on remuneration. We're also working on technical standards to determine the different types of Aifmd, so defining the scope. And last but not least, the negotiation of cooperation arrangements with third countries. And you may remember that it's a very substantial piece for the Aifmd, and it's going to be the first time that we've got a real passport mechanism for third country fund managers. Of course, with a system which is quite complex, and it's supposed to take full effect only in 2019. Esma is likely to play a very central role in that piece of work, because we intend to centralize the negotiation of those agreements between the various countries and the third countries. So we won't be signatory to those agreements, but we intend to articulate and manage the negotiation process. Going quickly through the other text, a quick word about EMIR, which is going to affect you with the clearing obligations. Financial counterparties are part of that. There are some exemptions and some threshold, but I'm not sure a lot of you will be able to skip that. And we've got our role as setting up the register for all the products that will have to be cleared, as well as the authorized CCPs. We're also working, if I can get to the next slide, which doesn't seem to be the case. Okay, then there is the non-clear trades, where we've got all the risk mitigation techniques which are being discussed, and the reporting. So all that will affect most of you, I guess. Then the second thing that I want to mention briefly is the short selling regulation. There also we are making strong progress on both technical standard and delegated act, or advice for delegated act, with very narrow deadline. And we need to move quite swiftly on those. And I guess you all know the content of the text, so I won't come back to you on that. So EMIR and short selling are progressing fast, and then the upcoming one will be MiFID II, with the timetable which is a bit longer, because I think the Commission is expecting that to have that concluded in terms of negotiation sometime by the end of or mid next year, even if the Danish presidency is making some fast progress on that. I try to just withdraw from that two texts the part which are likely to affect you most. There is a definition of professional client, but where there is not a lot of very substantial changes, but still a bit of marginal variation. There is the complex versus non-complex instrument, which has a lot of consequences on the way those products are actually distributed to investors. And with the structured UCITS questions, the new UCITS, which are likely to move from one category to the other. Thirdly, you've got all the discussion about the inducements and the fact that the inducement will not be allowed if independent advice is to be provided as such. And I was mentioning previously the fact that we are likely to have banning powers for some product and services within that. Last kind of summary slide on everything which has to do with UCITS, so basically all the rest. PRIPS is really important, and the proposal by the Commission, at least the official one, because I mean I think there was some leakage, is supposed to come end of next month or beginning of May, and that will cover the disclosure part of the project. Bear in mind that the distribution will be MiFID, and the Aifmd, which is the other part of the distribution mechanism, is supposed to follow MiFID very closely. And we're also doing or finishing the work on the ETF guidelines. It's open for consultation, so please come back to us on that with a view to issue those guidelines before summer. And it's quite a substantial piece of work that we have started doing on that. And then we will have UCITS 5 to be released in terms of proposal with the PRIPS. It's called the consumer package, if I recall correctly. That will cover actually three main areas. Two are only mentioned there, which are depositories, remuneration, and sanctions. And the one which is not mentioned, which is the venture capital and social entrepreneur funds, which is this idea of having a specific regime for funds below 500 million, is also being negotiated with the Council and the Presidency, and is apparently making some very fast progress on that. So that was a kind of the quick review of the regulatory environment. Very happy to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Laurent. That was a very broad sweep at what Esma does and what's in the legislative pipeline at the moment. Are there any questions that anybody has for Laurent? In your work, Laurent, whose responsibility is it to do impact assessment exercises for every one of those measures? Are there impact assessment exercises done? Who does them? Who ensures that they are robust? And what happens when the results are not very positive?
It's our responsibility, so we're doing that internally. We've got an economic team which is helping us to do that. We also have a network of coordinators in the various countries that can provide us with data. I mean, to be honest, it's incredibly difficult to do. It's always a challenge. And it's incredibly difficult to do in a very short deadline. So it's really an area where I think we need to improve. But I think we have obliged ourselves to do systematic ones. Some of them, I would agree, are not detailed enough in terms of figures. But it's also one area where you can definitely assist us by providing data and feedback in order for us to have more robust study made. On the outcome, the way we want to look at them is we want to start them very early in the process, in the sense that a cost-benefit analysis makes no sense if it's a pure formal exercise at the end of the process when the text is drafted. So what we tend to do, and we do it more and more efficiently, I think, is to have that in mind when we start drafting either guidelines or advice for the Commission. And we are progressing on that cost-benefit analysis along the way. And sometimes we have had, I've been with Esma only for 7 months now, but I can clearly recall one or two instances where we had some issues and we had to revisit the text. But once again, there is room for improvement, but you can definitely contribute to that by providing us feedback and data for those exercises.
Thank you very much indeed. Any final questions for Laurent? Maybe, Laurent, you could join us, and quite like to involve you in the next session as well. Thank you very much indeed.